Chapter 1. The empty house. Rolan unlocked the front door with the same mechanical motion he'd done 1,000 times before. The key slid in, the lock clicked, and the door swung open to a silence so complete it felt like a weight pressing against his chest. No laughter, no squeals, no tiny feet pounding across the hardwood. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the wall clock in the kitchen. He stepped inside, loosened his tie, and dropped his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the stillness. For a moment he stood there, staring at the empty living room. The couch sat perfectly in place, cushions unrumpled. The coffee table gleamed, untouched. It looked like a showroom, not a home. Carter hated that. He tossed his jacket over the arm of the couch and sank into it, rubbing his face with both hands. 34 years old. A steady job, a decent salary, and a house that should have been filled with life. Instead, it was a hollow shell he visited between workdays and weekends without his kids. Kyle was 4. Laura was 6. Two bright sparks in a world that had gone dim the day his marriage ended. He saw them every other weekend, 48 hours of chaos and joy before they vanished back to their mother's house. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. But it was all the court had given him, and all he could cling to. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Success was supposed to feel good. He'd worked his way up from the yard at the construction company, hauling lumber and learning the ropes, to a leadership role in the office. People respected him. He was the guy who got things done. But what did it matter when he came home to silence? His phone buzzed on the coffee table. Carter glanced at it, just a calendar reminder for tomorrow's meeting. He ignored it and stood, wandering into the kitchen. He opened the fridge, stared at the contents like they might offer answers. A 6-pack of beer, leftover Chinese takeout, and a carton of eggs. He grabbed a beer, popped the cap, and leaned against the counter. The truth was, he wasn't the only one. Half the guys at work were in the same boat. Divorced, kids on alternating weekends trying to piece together a life that didn't feel broken. They joked about it sometimes, but underneath the humor was the same ache Carter felt now. He took a long pull from the bottle and stared out the window at the dark yard. There had to be a better way. Something to make this less miserable. Something to give the kids more than 2 lonely days with their dad and a bunch of awkward playdates that never lined up. The idea hit him like a spark in the gloom. What if they could all rearrange their weekends? Sync them up so every dad had his kids at the same time. Then they could do big community events, parks, fairs, camping trips. The kids would have friends to play with, and the dads wouldn't feel like they were parenting in isolation. And on the off weekends, they could hit the gym, grab drinks, maybe even figure out how to date again without feeling like washed-up relics. Carter smiled for the first time that night. It was crazy. It was complicated. But it was possible. He'd bring it up at lunch tomorrow. See if anyone else thought it was worth a shot. He finished his beer, rinsed the bottle, and set it in the recycling bin. Upstairs, the kids' rooms waited. Beds neatly made, toys lined up like soldiers. Carter paused in the doorway of Laura's room, staring at the pink comforter and the stuffed unicorn perched on the pillow. He reached out, smoothing the fabric with his hand. "Miss you, kiddo," he whispered. Then he turned off the light and went to bed, the silence following him like a shadow. Chapter 2. The lunch table revolution. The cafeteria smelled like fried chicken and ambition. Carter slid his tray onto the table where 3 other guys from the office were already halfway through their meals. Greg, the project manager with a laugh that could shake drywall, was telling a story about his kid flushing a toy car down the toilet. Across from him sat Marcus, quiet but sharp, the kind of guy who could calculate load-bearing stress in his head while sipping coffee. Beside Marcus was Tony, the youngest of the group, still adjusting to life after his divorce and wearing that shell-shocked look Carter remembered all too well. Carter stabbed his fork into a pile of mashed potatoes and waited for Greg's punchline. It came with a roar of laughter that turned heads from 2 tables over. Greg grinned like he'd just won a comedy award. Plumber said it was the worst clog he'd ever seen, Greg finished, wiping his mouth. Charged me $200 to rescue a Hot Wheels. 200. Tony whistled. That's like half my grocery budget. Half your grocery budget. Greg shot back. What are you feeding your kid? Goldflakes. Carter chuckled, but his mind was already spinning with the idea he'd had last night. He waited for the laughter to die down, then leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Hey," he said, voice casual but carrying a spark of something more. "What if we could make this whole divorced dad thing suck a little less?" 3 sets of eyes turned toward him. Greg raised an eyebrow. "You got a magic wand in that briefcase of yours?" "Not exactly," Carter said. "But hear me out. We all get our kids on different weekends, right? Which means when I've got mine, you're free. When you've got yours, I'm sitting at home alone. So what if we, I don't know, synced it up?" Marcus frowned. "Synced it up?" "Yeah." Carter leaned in, warming to the idea. "We talk to our exes, shuffle the schedules so we all have our kids on the same weekends. Then we can do stuff together, big park days, trips to the zoo, whatever. The kids get friends to play with, we get to feel like actual human beings again." Greg let out a low whistle. "That's actually not the worst idea I've heard today." Tony perked up. "Wait, so on the weekends without kids, We hit the gym, Carter said, grinning. Grab drinks. Maybe even figure out how to date again without feeling like we're auditioning for a reality show called Lonely Dads of America. Greg laughed so hard he nearly choked on his chicken. Man, sign me up. My dating profile still says, likes long walks on the beach. I haven't seen a beach in 5 years. Marcus tapped his fork against his plate, thoughtful. Logistically, it's a nightmare, but doable, if everyone's on board. Exactly, Carter said. We make it a group thing. No secrets, no weird club vibes. Just dads trying to give their kids a better time, and maybe ourselves too. Before anyone could respond, a voice cut in from behind them, deep, smooth, and carrying the kind of authority that made people sit up straighter. I like it. Carter turned, and his stomach did a flip. Standing there, tray in hand, was Richard Hale, CEO of the company. The guy who signed their paychecks and probably owned 3 houses with more square footage than Carter's entire neighborhood. Richard set his tray down at the end of the table like he'd been part of the conversation all along. You're talking about syncing custody weekends? Greg blinked. Yeah, just an idea. Richard smiled, and it wasn't the corporate smile Carter had seen in board meetings. It was tired, genuine. Count me in. The table went silent for a beat, then erupted in disbelief. You're divorced, Tony blurted, then immediately looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Richard chuckled. 2 years now, 2 kids. And let me tell you, money doesn't make you less lonely. It just means you have more to lose. Carter felt something shift in the air. This wasn't just a lunch table joke anymore. It was a movement, a spark catching fire. Greg raised his soda like a toast. To synced weekends. Marcus clinked his water bottle against it. And to not dying alone. Tony grinned. And maybe, finding someone who doesn't run when we say the word custody. Carter laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in months. For the first time in a long time, he felt like something good was on the horizon. Something worth looking forward to. Chapter 3. The first synced weekend. Saturday morning arrived like a promise Carter wasn't sure he could keep. He stood in his kitchen, pouring orange juice into 2 plastic cups while Kyle sat cross-legged on the floor, humming to himself and trying to fit a dinosaur into a toy truck. Laura perched at the counter, swinging her legs and watching him with the solemn authority only a 6-year-old could muster. Daddy, she said, are we going to the park today? Not just the park, Carter said, sliding the cups toward them. The big park, with the playground and the splash pad. Laura's eyes widened. The one with the giant slide? That's the one. Carter grinned, feeling a flicker of excitement. And guess what? There's going to be other kids there. Lots of them. Kyle looked up, face smeared with peanut butter from breakfast. Other kids. Yep. Carter crouched down, ruffling his son's hair. Daddy's friends from work are bringing their kids too. It's going to be like a kid festival. Laura tilted her head. Do they have unicorn rides? Carter laughed. Not unless Greg found a way to rent one overnight. She frowned. Greg sounds like he should have unicorns. Trust me, Carter said, standing and grabbing the diaper bag. Though Kyle was technically out of diapers, Carter had learned that wipes were non-negotiable. Greg barely has matching socks. The drive to the park was a chorus of questions, mostly from Laura, who had a talent for interrogating like a seasoned detective. Carter answered what he could, dodged what he couldn't, and tried not to think about how much was riding on this day. If this worked, if the kids had fun, if the dads didn't implode under the weight of logistics, then maybe this crazy idea had legs. The park was already buzzing when they arrived. Carter spotted Greg first, hard to miss, with his booming laugh and a t-shirt that read World's Okayest Dad. Marcus was setting up a folding table with snacks, and Tony was wrestling with a pop-up tent like it had personally insulted him. And then there was Richard Hale, CEO extraordinaire, carrying a cooler like any other dad on a Saturday morning. Carter. Greg waved, nearly knocking over a juice box pyramid. You made it. Wouldn't miss it, Carter said, herding Kyle and Laura toward the group. Kids, this is Mr. Greg, Mr. Marcus, Mr. Tony, and Mr. Hale. Laura squinted up at Richard. You look like the guy on Daddy's computer. Richard chuckled. Guilty as charged. Introductions blurred into chaos as kids darted toward the playground, leaving a trail of jackets and half-eaten granola bars. Carter watched Kyle climb the steps to the slide with a grin so wide it made Carter's chest ache. Laura was already holding court near the swings, chatting with a girl about unicorns. For the first time in a long time, Carter felt normal, like a dad doing dad things, not a visitor in his own children's lives. He turned to grab a juice box and nearly collided with someone. A woman, tall, with chestnut hair pulled into a loose ponytail and sunglasses perched on her head. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater, and she was laughing at him apparently. Sorry, Carter said, stepping back. Didn't see you there. No harm done. Her smile was warm, easy. Looks like you guys have quite the operation going. Yeah. Carter rubbed the back of his neck. First attempt at a community thing. Dad's syncing weekends so the kids can have more fun. That's brilliant. She glanced toward the playground, where a boy about Laura's age was scaling the monkey bars. I'm Sophie, by the way. Carter felt something shift, like the air had gone lighter. Carter. Well, Carter, Sophie said. If you ever need tips on organizing chaos, I'm your girl. I've got a 6-year-old who thinks gravity is optional. Carter laughed, and it wasn't forced. It wasn't polite. It was real. I'll keep that in mind. They stood there for a moment, watching their kids play, the sound of laughter and squeals filling the air. Carter felt something he hadn't felt in years. A spark. Small but undeniable. Maybe this idea wasn't just about weekends. Maybe it was about beginnings. Chapter 4. Wingmen without wings. The gym smelled like determination and regret. Carter stood just inside the entrance, staring at the rows of treadmills like they were instruments of medieval torture. Beside him, Greg was already cracking jokes. Marcus looked like he was calculating the structural integrity of the weight racks. And Tony was scrolling through his phone like he was hoping to find an escape hatch. All right, gentlemen, Greg announced, clapping his hands. Operation Lose the Dad Bod begins now. Carter smirked. You make it sound like a military campaign. It is, Greg said, puffing out his chest. We're fighting gravity, metabolism, and the fact that half of us think pizza counts as a food group. Tony groaned. I thought we were just gonna do cardio and call it a day. Cardio? Greg scoffed. Cardio is for people who hate themselves. We're lifting. We're sculpting. We're becoming the kind of men who can walk into a bar and not look like we wandered in from a PDA meeting. Carter chuckled, but his stomach tightened. It had been years since he'd set foot in a gym. Work, kids, exhaustion, those had been his excuses. But now he was here, staring at dumbbells like they held the secret to happiness. Marcus adjusted his glasses and eyed the weight rack. Start small, he said. No one's impressing anyone today. Greg grabbed a pair of 20-pound dumbbells and started curling like he was auditioning for a superhero movie. Speak for yourself. Carter picked up a 10-pound weight, testing the heft. It felt heavier than he remembered. He started curling, slow and steady, trying not to look like he was dying. So, Greg said between reps, any of you actually thinking about dating again? Tony snorted. Thinking about it? Sure. Doing it? Not unless someone invents an app called Single Dads who don't have time for games. Marcus grunted. Dating apps are a nightmare. Half the profiles are fake, and the other half want someone who can whisk them off to Paris on a Tuesday. Greg winked at Carter. What about you, man? You've been smiling a lot since the park. Carter froze mid-rep. What? Don't what me? Greg said, grinning like a shark. You met someone, didn't you? Carter set the dumbbell down, wiping his hands on his shorts. I talked to someone at the park. Her name's Sophie. Greg's eyebrows shot up. Sophie. Nice name. What's her deal? She's a mom, Carter said, keeping his tone casual. Smart. Funny. Normal. Normal is underrated, Marcus said, switching to a bench press. Normal is gold. Tony leaned against the wall. So, are you gonna ask her out? Carter hesitated. The question hung in the air like a challenge. He thought about Sophie's smile, the way she joked about organizing chaos, the spark he'd felt standing next to her. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. But then he thought about Kyle and Laura, about custody schedules and bedtime routines and the fragile balance of his life. I don't know, he admitted. It's complicated. Greg slapped him on the back hard enough to make him stumble. Everything's complicated, man. That's life. You want simple? Buy a goldfish. Carter laughed, shaking his head. But inside, something was shifting. Maybe Greg was right. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for perfect and start living in the messy, beautiful now. He picked up the dumbbell again, muscles burning, heart pounding, not just from the workout, but from the thought of what might come next. Chapter 5. Sparks at the park. The second synced weekend felt different from the first. The dads had ironed out the chaos, mostly. There were still juice boxes exploding like grenades and kids sprinting in every direction. But this time, Carter wasn't nervous. He was hopeful. The park was alive with laughter and the smell of sunscreen. Carter carried a cooler in one hand and Kyle's tiny backpack in the other, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Greg was already holding court near the picnic tables, booming about his legendary grilling skills, while Marcus arranged snacks with the precision of a NASA engineer. Tony was chasing his toddler, who had apparently decided pants were optional. And then Carter saw her. Sophie stood near the splash pad, sunglasses perched on her head, hair catching the sunlight like copper threads. She was laughing at something her son, Ethan, Carter remembered, was saying, and the sound carried across the park like music. Carter felt his pulse kick up a notch. Laura spotted Ethan first. Daddy, that's the boy who likes unicorns. She grabbed Kyle's hand and dragged him toward the splash pad before Carter could respond. Guess we're heading that way, Carter muttered, adjusting the cooler and following. Sophie turned as they approached, her smile blooming like it had been waiting for him. Carter, she said, warm and easy. Looks like you brought reinforcements. 2 of my finest, Carter said, nodding toward his kids, who were already negotiating with Ethan about who got the biggest water gun. How's your weekend so far? Loud, Sophie said with a laugh. But in a good way. Ethan's been talking about this all week. Same with Laura, Carter said. She made me promise there'd be unicorns. Sophie grinned. Well, there's a guy over there wearing a unicorn floa tie. Does that count? Carter laughed, and it felt good, natural, like the sound belonged here. Close enough. They stood side by side, watching their kids shriek and splash, the sun glinting off the water. For a moment, Carter let himself imagine this wasn't just a park day, that this was normal, that Sophie was someone he could call on a Tuesday night just to talk about nothing and everything. So, Sophie said, breaking the silence, this whole synced weekend thing, how did you come up with it? Carter shrugged, trying to play it cool. Lonely night, empty house, too much thinking. Figured if we're all stuck in the same boat, we might as well row together. That's actually brilliant, Sophie said, her tone softening. Most people just complain. You did something. Carter felt heat creep up his neck. Well, I had help. Greg's enthusiasm is terrifying. Sophie laughed again, and Carter found himself cataloging the sound like it was something rare and precious. He wanted to hear it again, and again. Before he could say more, Greg's voice boomed across the park. Carter, you're on grill duty. Carter groaned. Saved by the meat. Sophie smiled, eyes twinkling. Go. Feed the masses. I'll keep an eye on your crew. Carter hesitated, then nodded. Thanks. I owe you. As he walked toward the picnic tables, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. A pull. Not just attraction, but possibility. The kind that made you want to try, even when trying scared the hell out of you. Chapter 6. Texts and tangles. Carter stared at his phone like it was a ticking bomb. The screen glowed with Sophie's name. Well, technically, Sophie, Park, because that's how he'd saved it after Greg bullied him into asking for her number. He'd typed it in with sweaty palms and a silent prayer that she wouldn't laugh in his face. Now, 2 days later, he was drafting his first text, and deleting it, and drafting it again. Hey, it was great seeing you at the park. Delete. Too formal. Had fun Saturday. Kids loved it. Delete. Sounds like a PDA memo. So, unicorn rides next time? He stared at that one. It was funny. It was casual. It was maybe too casual? Before he could overthink it into oblivion, Greg's voice boomed from behind him. You texting her? Carter nearly dropped the phone. He spun around to see Greg leaning against the doorway of his office, grinning like a man who just caught someone sneaking cookies before dinner. None of your business, Carter said, shoving the phone into his pocket. Greg sauntered in, plopping into the chair across from Carter's desk. Oh, it's my business. This is history in the making. Carter Rolan, Mr. Spreadsheet, finally taking a shot. Carter rolled his eyes. You're insufferable. And yet you love me, Greg said, kicking his feet up. So what's the holdup? Just text her. It's not that simple, Carter muttered. I don't want to sound desperate. Greg snorted. Buddy, you're a single dad. Desperate is implied. Carter threw a pen at him. Greg caught it midair, still grinning. Fine, Carter said, pulling out his phone again. I'll text her. He typed quickly before he could chicken out. Hey, had fun Saturday. Kids are still talking about it. Hope you survived the splash pad chaos. He hit send and immediately regretted every life choice that led to this moment. Greg leaned over the desk, eyes gleaming. Oh, smooth. Casual. I like it. Carter groaned. I hate this. His phone buzzed. Carter froze. Greg practically climbed onto the desk to see. Sophie's reply popped up. Barely survived. Ethan tried to drink the splash pad water. Pretty sure that's not FDA approved. Carter laughed out loud, tension melting from his shoulders. He typed back. Kyle tried to eat a leaf. So, gourmet choices all around. The conversation flowed from there. Funny, easy, like they'd been doing this for years. They joked about their kids' questionable survival instincts, swapped park horror stories, and even touched on favorite movies. Carter learned Sophie loved old rom-coms, which felt like fate laughing in his face. By the time Greg left, Carter was smiling at his phone like a teenager. He didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt light. Chapter 7. The first date. Carter had planned everything down to the last detail. Dinner at a cozy Italian place downtown, a table by the window, and, because he was feeling ambitious, a stop at the little jazz bar 2 blocks away. It wasn't flashy, but it was thoughtful. Romantic without trying too hard. He checked his watch for the 10th time. The babysitter was supposed to arrive at 6. Sophie had agreed to meet him at 7. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. The text came at 5:45. Hey, Carter. I'm so sorry, but I can't make it tonight. My car broke down and I'm stuck waiting for a tow truck. Carter stared at the screen, heart sinking. Then another text buzzed in. From the babysitter. Emergency. Can't come tonight. So sorry. Carter closed his eyes and let out a groan that could have registered on the Richter scale. 2 cancellations in 5 minutes. Perfect. He paced the living room, phone in hand, brain scrambling for options. He could cancel. He could reschedule. He could no. He didn't want to wait another week. He'd been looking forward to this too much. He typed quickly. Don't worry about the car. I'll pick you up. And I'll bring the kids. We'll make it work. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Sophie's reply came almost instantly. Are you sure? That sounds chaotic. Carter grinned. Chaos is my specialty. By 7:30, Carter was pulling up in front of Sophie's house with Kyle and Laura in the back seat, both buzzing with excitement. Sophie stepped out onto the porch, looking effortlessly beautiful in a simple black dress and boots, her hair loose around her shoulders. Carter felt his breath catch. Wow, he said before he could stop himself. You look amazing. Sophie smiled, a little shy. Thanks. You brought reinforcements, I see. Kyle waved from the back seat. Hi, we're going to eat spaghetti, Laura added. And Daddy said there's music after. Sophie laughed, sliding into the passenger seat. Sounds like a party. Dinner was loud. Kyle spilled his juice twice. Laura asked the waiter if unicorns were on the dessert menu. And Carter spent half the meal apologizing while Sophie laughed like she was having the time of her life. This is actually fun, she said, twirling pasta around her fork. Not what I expected, but fun. Glad to hear it, Carter said, relief washing over him. I was worried you'd run for the hills. Run. Sophie shook her head. Carter, this is real. And honestly, I like real. Her words hit him like sunlight breaking through clouds. For the first time in years, Carter felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't failing at this whole life thing. They skipped the jazz bar, opting instead for ice cream at a little shop with rainbow sprinkles and sticky tables. The kids were thrilled. Sophie was glowing. And Carter? He was falling hard and fast, for a woman who made chaos feel like home. Chapter 8. Dad Drama. Sunday evening was winding down when Carter's phone buzzed with a name that made his stomach tighten. Melissa, his ex-wife. He hesitated before answering, bracing himself for whatever storm was brewing. Hey, he said, keeping his voice neutral. Hey, Melissa replied, her tone clipped but not hostile. Laura told me you took them out this weekend. Big park day. Yeah, Carter said, glancing toward the living room where Kyle and Laura were sprawled on the rug, coloring like tiny Picassos. We had a blast. Melissa was quiet for a beat. She also mentioned someone named Sophie. Carter closed his eyes. Of course Laura would mention Sophie. 6-year-olds had no concept of subtlety. She's just a friend, Carter said quickly. Met her at the park. Her son was playing with the kids. Melissa's sigh crackled through the line. Carter, I'm not trying to start anything, but if you're dating, I need to know. For the kids. I'm not. Carter stopped because lying felt wrong. I mean, we've talked, had dinner, but it's early. Really early. Melissa's voice softened, but only slightly. Look, I'm not against you moving on. Honestly, I hope you do. But please don't rush this. They've been through enough. I know, Carter said, guilt gnawing at him. I'd never put them in a bad spot. I'm trusting you, Melissa said, and then the line went dead. Carter sat there, phone heavy in his hand, heart heavier in his chest. He wasn't doing anything wrong. Was he? Sophie was kind, patient, real. But Melissa was right. The kids had already lost so much. Was he selfish for wanting something for himself? Greg's words from the gym echoed in his head. Everything's complicated, man. That's life. You want simple? Buy a goldfish. Carter let out a humorless laugh. He didn't want simple. He wanted Sophie. He wanted laughter in his house again. But he also wanted to protect his kids from more upheaval. He looked at Kyle and Laura, their heads bent over crayons, faces serene. He'd do anything for them. Anything. Even if it meant slowing down when every part of him wanted to sprint. Later that night, Carter texted Sophie. Hey, just wanted to say I had a great time the other night. But things might need to move slow. Hope that's okay. Her reply came a minute later. Slow is fine. I'm not going anywhere. Carter stared at the words, a knot in his chest loosening just enough for him to breathe. Chapter 9. The big event. The Saturday of the big community day dawned bright and warm. The kind of Florida morning that promised sunshine and chaos in equal measure. Carter pulled into the park's lot with his trunk packed like a survival kit, coolers, folding chairs, sunscreen, and enough juice boxes to hydrate a small army. Kyle and Laura were bouncing in the back seat like caffeinated kangaroos. Daddy, is there going to be a bounce house? Laura asked for the 5th time. Yes, Carter said, hauling the cooler out. And face painting. And games. And unicorns? She interrupted, eyes wide with hope. Carter grinned. Still working on that one. The park was already buzzing when they arrived. Greg was in full carnival barker mode, shouting instructions while wearing a t-shirt that read Grill Sergeant. Marcus was setting up a sign-in table with color-coded wristbands like this was a corporate retreat. Tony was wrangling a balloon arch that looked more like modern art than decoration. And then Carter saw Sophie. She was standing near the craft station, hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing a soft green tank top and jeans. She had a clipboard in one hand and a smile that made Carter forget how to breathe for a second. When she spotted him, her face lit up. You made it, she called, weaving through the crowd to meet him. And you brought reinforcements. Kyle and Laura barreled past Carter to hug Sophie like she was an old friend. Carter's chest warmed at the sight. Sophie crouched to greet them, laughing as Kyle proudly showed off his dinosaur t-shirt. You look organized, Carter said, nodding at the clipboard. Don't be fooled, Sophie said, straightening. This is pure theater. I'm winging it like everyone else. Looks convincing, Carter said, smiling. Before they could say more, Greg's voice boomed across the park. Carter, you're on grill duty again. And don't burn the hot dogs this time. Carter groaned. One time, Greg. One time. Sophie laughed, and Carter felt that spark again. The one that had been growing since the first park day. He wanted to stay and talk, but duty and Greg's volume called. He handed Sophie the cooler with a grin. Keep this safe. It's got the good snacks. Consider it guarded, she said, eyes twinkling. The event was a glorious mess. Kids darted between stations like sugar-fueled pinballs. Someone spilled an entire tub of glitter, turning the craft area into a disco. The bounce house deflated mid-jump, prompting Greg to dive in like a superhero to rescue 3 squealing toddlers. Carter flipped burgers while Marcus lectured a group of dads on proper hydration ratios for outdoor play. Through it all, Carter kept catching glimpses of Sophie, laughing with parents, helping kids tie balloon animals, wiping paint off Ethan's nose. Every time their eyes met, Carter felt something steady and sure settle in his chest. This wasn't just attraction. This was connection. Later, when the chaos had mellowed into tired giggles and sticky fingers, Carter found Sophie sitting on a picnic bench, sipping water like it was liquid gold. He dropped beside her, stretching his legs. Survived, he said. Barely, she replied, smiling. But it was worth it. Carter nodded, watching Kyle and Laura chase Ethan across the grass. Yeah, it was. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind that felt like a promise. Carter wanted to say something real. But before he could, Greg hollered from across the park. Carter, we need more ketchup. Carter groaned. Sophie laughed, and somehow that laugh made everything feel okay. Chapter 10. Confessions and Complications. The glow from the big event lingered for days. Carter felt lighter, like life had cracked open a window and let some fresh air in. He and Sophie had been texting more. Funny memes, quick updates, little slices of their day. It was easy, natural, until it wasn't. The misunderstanding started with a single message. Sophie had texted, Ethan's asking if he can see Laura and Kyle again soon. Maybe we can plan something? Carter, juggling a late meeting and a headache, typed back without thinking. Not sure that's a good idea right now. He meant the timing. His schedule was a mess. Melissa had been tense lately, and he didn't want to rush things. But the words landed wrong. Sophie's reply was short. Got it. No worries. And then, nothing. Hours passed. Then a day. Carter stared at his phone like it had betrayed him. He replayed the text in his head, wincing at how cold it sounded. He wanted to fix it, but every draft felt clumsy. Finally, he called her. She answered on the third ring, voice calm but distant. Hey, Carter said, throat tight. Listen about that text. I didn't mean. It's fine, Sophie said. And the way she said it told him it wasn't fine. No, it's not, Carter said, running a hand through his hair. I'm trying to be careful. With the kids. With everything. I get that, Sophie said softly. But Carter, if careful means keeping me at arm's length, then maybe this isn't what you want. Her words hit like a punch. Because it was what he wanted. More than anything. But fear had its claws in him. The fear of messing up, of hurting his kids, of losing the fragile balance he'd built. I do want this, he said, voice rough. I want you. I'm terrified. There was a pause. Then Sophie's voice, gentle but firm. You don't have to have it all figured out, but you do have to let me in. Carter closed his eyes, heart pounding. He thought about the empty house, the laughter at the park, the way Sophie's smile made everything feel possible. He thought about Kyle and Laura, and how they deserved a dad who wasn't afraid to live. You're right, he whispered. I've been hiding behind excuses. I don't want to do that anymore. Another pause. Then Sophie said, okay, then let's try. Slow, messy, whatever it takes. Carter felt something break loose inside him. A knot he'd been carrying for years. Thank you, he said, and meant it. When they hung up, Carter sat in the quiet, staring at his phone. For the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like space, room for something new to grow. Chapter 11. Love in Sync. The next synced weekend felt like a turning point. Carter pulled into the park with Kyle and Laura chattering in the back seat, their voices bubbling with excitement. He wasn't nervous this time, not like before. He was ready. Ready to stop hiding. Ready to let life be messy and beautiful and real. Sophie was already there, standing near the picnic tables with Ethan, her hair catching the sunlight like a halo. When she saw Carter, her smile was warm and steady, and something inside him unclenched. Hey, she said as he walked up, cooler in hand. You made it. Wouldn't miss it, Carter said, grinning. Kids have been counting down since Tuesday. Laura darted toward Ethan, dragging Kyle behind her like a tiny general leading troops. Carter watched them go, his chest tightening with something that felt suspiciously like hope. Sophie stepped closer, her voice low. So, we're good. Carter met her eyes. Better than good. I meant what I said. I want this. I want you. Her smile softened, and for a moment, the chaos of the park faded into the background. Then let's make it work. They didn't kiss, not yet. But the way Sophie's hand brushed his as they walked toward the tables felt like a promise. The dads were in rare form. Greg was flipping burgers like he was auditioning for a cooking show. Marcus was lecturing someone about proper cooler organization, and Tony was trying to keep his toddler from eating a balloon. When Carter and Sophie approached, Greg spotted them and grinned like a man who just won the lottery. Well, Greg boomed, slapping Carter on the back hard enough to make him stumble. Look who's finally sinking more than weekends. Carter groaned. Greg. Don't Greg me, Greg said, waving a spatula like a victory flag. This is a historic moment. Someone get a camera. Marcus smirked. We're happy for you, man. Seriously. Tony gave a thumbs up while wrestling the balloon away from his kid. About time. Carter rolled his eyes, but he couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't just surviving, he was living. And not alone. Later, as the sun dipped low and kids chased fireflies across the grass, Carter sat beside Sophie on a picnic bench, their shoulders touching. Kyle and Laura were laughing with Ethan, their voices ringing like music in the warm evening air. This, Sophie said softly, watching the kids. This feels right. Carter nodded, his throat tight. Yeah, it does. He thought about the empty house, the long nights, the fear that had kept him frozen. And then he thought about this moment, the laughter, the warmth, the way Sophie's hand fit perfectly in his. For the first time in a long time, Carter believed in second chances. Chapter 12. A new normal. Monday mornings used to feel like a grind. Alarm clocks, coffee that never seemed strong enough, and the weight of another week stretching ahead. But lately, Carter noticed something different. The weight wasn't crushing anymore. It was manageable, maybe even light. He sat at his desk, sipping coffee while his inbox filled with the usual flood of project updates and budget reports. Outside his office window, the yard buzzed with activity. Forklifts humming, crews shouting. The rhythm of a company that had been his second home for over a decade. For years, this had been all he had. Now, it was just one piece of a life that finally felt whole. His phone buzzed. A photo from Sophie, Ethan, Kyle, and Laura sitting on a blanket in the park, grinning with popsicles in hand. The caption read, "Survived another sugar rush." Barely. Carter smiled, warmth blooming in his chest. He typed back, "You're a hero. I owe you coffee. Or wine. Or both." Her reply came almost instantly. "Both sounds perfect." He set the phone down, still smiling, and leaned back in his chair. This was what balance looked like. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Work, kids, love. All tangled together in a way that felt messy and beautiful and worth every ounce of effort. The dads group had become a tradition. Every other weekend, the park filled with laughter and chaos, juice boxes and grill smoke. They'd even started a group chat, Weekend Warriors, where Greg posted memes at ungodly hours and Marcus shared hydration tips no one asked for. Tony had finally landed a date, thanks to Greg's questionable advice and Carter's pep talks. Even Richard Hale showed up sometimes, flipping burgers like he didn't run half the state's construction projects. It wasn't just about synced weekends anymore. It was about connection, about building something bigger than themselves, a network of dads who refused to let loneliness win. That evening, Carter pulled into his driveway with Kyle and Laura chattering in the back seat. The house didn't feel empty anymore, felt like home. There were crayons on the coffee table, a half-finished puzzle on the rug, and laughter echoing down the hall. Later, after bedtime stories and goodnight kisses, Carter stepped onto the porch with his phone in hand. He called Sophie, and when she answered, her voice was warm and familiar, like the sound of everything he'd been missing. "Hey," he said softly. "Just wanted to hear your voice. You're getting good at this," she teased. "Trying," he said. "For you. For them. For me." There was a pause. Then Sophie said, "You're doing great, Carter." And for the first time in years, he believed it. Chapter 13. Epilogue. Weekends forever. 2 years later. The park looked almost the same. Sunlight spilling across the grass. Kids shrieking with laughter. Dads manning grills like seasoned pros. But for Carter, everything had changed. He stood near the picnic tables, one arm draped around Sophie's shoulders, watching Kyle and Laura race Ethan toward the splash pad. They were taller now, faster, their laughter ringing out like music. Sophie's hand rested lightly on his chest, and when she tilted her head to smile at him, Carter felt the same spark he'd felt that first day, and 1,000 more since. "Think they'll ever run out of energy?" Sophie asked, her voice warm with amusement. "Not a chance," Carter said, grinning. "Pretty sure they're solar-powered." She laughed, and Carter kissed her temple, the gesture so natural it felt like breathing. This was their life now. Shared weekends, family dinners, movie nights with popcorn spilled across the couch. It wasn't perfect. It was better. It was real. The dads group had grown. What started as 4 guys and a desperate idea had turned into a full-blown tradition. There were new faces now, men who'd heard about the Weekend Warriors and wanted in. They had a system, a rhythm, and a bond that went deeper than synced calendars. They were friends, brothers, a tribe built on laughter, support, and the stubborn refusal to let loneliness win. Greg was still loud, Marcus still meticulous, and Tony, well, Tony was now engaged, thanks to a woman who thought balloon wrangling was a sign of character. Even Richard Hale showed up, flipping burgers like he didn't have a board meeting on Monday. As the sun dipped low, Carter watched Kyle and Laura chase fireflies with Ethan, their giggles floating through the warm evening air. He felt Sophie's fingers lace with his and squeezed gently, gratitude swelling in his chest. He thought about the man he used to be, the one who came home to an empty house and wondered if happiness was something other people got to have. That man was gone. In his place was someone who'd learned that life doesn't wait for perfect. It waits for brave. Carter smiled, pulling Sophie closer as the kids ran back, faces glowing in the twilight. Ready to head home? She asked softly. Home, Carter echoed, and the word felt right, because home wasn't a house. It was this laughter, love, and weekends that would never feel empty again.